There's something timeless about a bottle. It holds more than liquid. It carries a place, a season, a memory, a celebration, a quiet moment, a story waiting to be opened. Welcome to Bottled Stories. Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Bottled Stories. I'm Tim Tibbetts here with my right hand, Rebecca, always on the right. Today, this episode is actually going to be a two-part episode because there's a lot to talk to, a lot to cover, and part of it is wine-based and part of it is the human element and the human side of the story. Today, we're talking about one of the most famous and most incredible wine producers in the world, not just in, the Langa and the Barolo Barbaresco region, but actually anywhere. Pio Cesare. So Pio Cesare was established by the first generation. Cesare Pio was actually his name. And he was the one who started the winery. And one of the cool things about the winery, I'll show you a little video here in a second, of a little bit of talking about the history of it and where it is.
The winery back to 1881. So when Pio Cesare was the father of my great-great-grandfather. Tonight we are going to have dinner also with my family as well, because my aunt, she will be cooking, but she will be also sitting at the dinner with us. Awesome. Federica, Federica and myself, we are the 5th generation of the winery, and also my son is coming as well tonight. Awesome. Yes, I'm still drunk for his birthday of last Saturday night, so I have to recover. Anyway, so family dinner for you tonight. And what is family is very important for us because Pio Cesare started to make wine over there. We are going there at the end of the tour. He bought this house in 1881, so exactly 145 years ago. And when he bought the house was finishing here at this wall, so which is exactly in coincidence with the entrance that you are seeing under my feet. He bought this house, and this house has already 3 different periods, which I will explain you a little bit later down. Romans, because Alba is a Roman town founded by the Roman Empire in 50 BC, so over than 2000 years ago. We have Roman walls over there, and somebody we don't know who in the late 1600s, so in the medieval time, built on top of the Roman wall this house. Then Pio Cesare arrived in 1981. He bought this house in the center of the village of Alba, and whatever is from this wall on this direction was built by us, by our family, step by step, in the course of 145 years. So then I will show you what we are building now in 2026. That is already 4 years that we are under construction. So please be patient. For some part is still under construction. Is really dirty. Some a lot of dust, but. And you have an excuse to come back next year to visit the winery.
Great.
To visit the winery when I hope it will be finished. Please.
One of the most important producers for the concept of exporting the words of Barolo Barbaresco to the world. So Cesare Pio was the first, and then Giuseppe Pio, he expanded the cellars, and then he was the one who built the brand's reputation. So Cesare Pio really was making wine for his friends and his family. There wasn't a big economical push for him to do so, but Giuseppe understood that this was something that could be a viable economic venture for them. And so he actually had Italian passport number 42. So he was one of the very first people in Italy to have a passport and to leave the country in order to promote the name Pio Cesare and the wines. So he would pack bags full of wines, and he would get on a train, and he would travel all over Europe 200 days a year, and he would go to every restaurant and he would hand sell wines to different restaurants around Europe. And that's why Pio Cesare's name has always been linked to quality, because Giuseppe Pio always picked the best restaurants to sell the wines to. So you have this, kind of chicken and egg thing going on where he was promoting a wine that really nobody knew about. And he was selling it to only the best people, and then the best people then promoted it as a high-end product. And all of a sudden now you have incredible marketing with a lot of just unbelievable forward thinking without a product. You had no product really at the time, and he created it out of nothing, and it's amazing. Absolutely brilliant story.
Say yes, then figure it out.
Exactly. I mean, we do it all the time. So then the next generation is the third generation, and this is Rosie Pio and Giuseppe Boffa. So the merging of the Boffa family with the Pio family, you now have these two different, where the names start to cross over and become more of the modern age. Giuseppe was an engineer, and he left his career in Milan during World War II to move to the winery and keep it running through the war. So he basically saved the winery from destruction in World War II. Absolutely critical part of that transition from the early, really forward thinking, really building a brand kind of generations to, we just have to make sure this keeps going. Not many people are still alive actually to remember what it was like in the war. The austerity measures that people had to go through in order to survive, the rationing, the extreme poverty, people eating stews made out of the grass in their yard. Extraordinary poverty. They kept this going. Every year making more wine, every year building up the cellars, every year expanding everything to make it a viable concern. Then we get to the fourth generation. And this is where things changed massively. So Pio Boffa is the son of Giuseppe Boffa and Rosie Pio. Pio Boffa. Funny how that works. This guy is an absolute legend in the wine world, even for people, in my age group, but for like the age group above us. He is an absolute legend. For over 40 years, he ran the winery, and he transitioned the winery from being a buyer of grapes to an estate producer. So the first thing that he did when he took over was start buying the land. So he would go to the farmers that they had been working with and then offer them a fair market price, and they would buy the land. That the farmers would continue to work the land in order to, somebody had to work it. And he would pay them basically to work the land after paying him for the land. So the farmers are making out great, but what he understood was when they owned the land, they could control the quality. And the quality from the last 40 years, from the late 70s, early 80s, it skyrocketed to what we know today as being one of the finest wines in the world. He also was an incredibly smart man, because they started doing things that nobody else in the area were really doing. In the 80s, he started building vineyard sites full of Chardonnay that no one else had ever taken the opportunity to try and do so. Their main focus is still on the indigenous grapes, still Dolcetto, still Barbera, still Nebbiolo, obviously Cortesi for the Gavi, still very focused on these indigenous grapes, but he took that leap of faith into what he wanted to call white Barolo. He wanted a grape that he thought was structured enough, could be built big enough for long aging to really express the terroir of the Lenga. And that's where now we have the L'Altro, which is an unoaked Chardonnay. It's 85% Chardonnay and 15% Sauv Blanc. So very aromatic, really pretty, really fresh, really bright. And then Pio de Lay. And Pio de Lay is a monster, big, powerful Chardonnay, French oak, really beautiful, absolutely spectacular. It's not really oaky. It reminds me very much of like the Chassagne Montrachet or the Puligny Montrachet. That style of Chardonnay is exactly what they're trying to produce, and it's absolutely exceptional. these were all parts of Pio Boffa's thing. And he also was, at this time now, not just traveling Europe, but he's traveling the whole world. They are now in over almost 60 countries they are distributed in, and he was traveling 220 days a year. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. And you're literally hand selling bottles. And lots of people will tell you the stories, especially in the US, because it was a big market for him. He really blew up the United States market and continues to be their largest market. But that really intense road schedule of going out and talking about wine, meeting with clients, being part of their lives, building relationships, all of that stuff
Super important.
is super important. And we got to see it firsthand, how important it actually is. And now Pio unfortunately passed away in 2021 from COVID-19. Completely unexpected. This is absolute tragedy for the family. And this is where part 2 kind of comes in. We will do this as an aside. I sat down with the 5th generation, Federico Boffa, who Federica was Pio's daughter, and her cousin, Cesare Benvenuto, was already working in the winery before Federica came along. But as the direct descendant of Pio, Federica ends up being at the top of the chain here. And now her and Cesare they share all the duties from travel. So they each travel more than 100 days a year. The winemaking, they're doing all the decisions for winemaking. She was just named in 2025. She was just named the best winemaker in the world under 35 years old. She's only 28 years old, and it feels like she's been doing this forever. She took over the winery at 23, and so I have a whole other video planned where I sat down with her for a little while and asked her about what it was like and how hard it was for someone of her age, for someone, obviously, we don't like to talk about things like this, but the reality is being a woman, especially a young woman, taking over a major, big brand that was primarily a patriarchal brand, obviously would have been difficult. And so we have a whole other video that we'll talk about, and that will be in part 2 of this video. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. But the two of them now, Federica and Cesare, have really guided this into a modern winery, a really incredible modern winery, and expanding on other things. Not just like the production really is never going to get any bigger because the land they own is the land they own, and they have no real intention of getting bigger, only improving the quality. So there are a couple things that were introduced that have kind of expanded the winery a little bit. Gavi was always a principal, obviously Barbera, always a principal. The 2 flagships, the Pio Barolo and Pio Barbaresco. Okay, so here's a joke. You're never going to let this get out of your head now. You will see it every time. When Cesare was on a site visit in Pennsylvania, he was at a dinner, and one of the guests asked, he was asking the guests, which ones are your favorites? Like, which one do you like? And someone told him, I really like the P10 more than the others. Okay, we'll focus in right here. Pio, not P10. They thought it was the P10 Barolo. We literally called this P10 every day while we were in Piedmont. Everywhere you go, you see, the signs are all over the place. Oh, hey, look, it's P10 again. I love that P10. Anyway, you'll never see it the same again. P10 will always be on your forefront in your name.
The label of this
Yes.
has not changed.
No, absolutely.
We saw a picture
in the cellar, and I think I have a photo that we can put right here.
Yep.
There is in the cellar, in their library room, and they don't have a large library because they don't produce a lot of wine, so they do not keep a lot around, and now they're starting to build up a little bit more. But going back in those early days, money needed to be made and they needed to survive. So they don't have a lot of surviving bottles that are going back a long time. But inside that library, they have one bottle of 1916 Pio Barolo right next to 2016 Pio Barolo on the same shelf. They are identical.
They haven't
There is
changed.
no change at all in the labeling. Maybe the print quality is better now than it was then. The paper that they would have used maybe a little bit more delicate back in the early days. But the reality is that label has never changed.
Why change it? If
And
it
so-
ain't broke, don't
Exactly.
fix it,
So
right?
the iconic
And it's
parts of
known.
it
Yeah.
here on the top corner, they are the only winery that is allowed to use the crest of the city of Alba on the label because they are situated right in the city center, and they have become known as the producer of Alba. It's pretty funny walking around the streets of Alba with Cesare. He can't go 20 seconds without somebody saying hello, somebody waving him down, somebody, asking about the family. And so it's amazing. It's fascinating to see just how central
Yeah.
they are in the entire culture of Alba and how important they are to the city of Alba. So that was super cool. Also across the front of the label, we'll call these now coins because the denomination of origin of Barolo forbids people from putting awards, medals of any kind that you win in contests or any of that kind of stuff, like, the World Wine Awards and Decanter and all of these different things. They're not allowed to put any awards on their labels, which they used to do back in the early days, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. They would have been medals of how many different contests they had won. Now they are just, they call them coins. They no longer say anything on them other than that they are coins. This winery, inside the winery, the cellars themselves. So you are in the city center, so there was really nowhere to go. And when you needed to expand, you couldn't go up because the family still, to this day, lives above the winery, up on the roof. So you can't go any higher. You can't go left or right because you have neighbors on both sides. So all you can do is go down. So
Or across the street, also.
that's that's for another topic. But going down is challenging because, as they discovered, the river, which is right next to them, creates an enormous amount of pressure below the water table. And so they built the first cellar. They went down multiple levels, and it's a really cool tour if you ever get a chance to do it. I highly suggest you go and visit them. But the first time they did that, the cellar imploded. It completely collapsed on itself under the pressure of the water. So then they had to get all the water back out, somehow prop it all back up, and rebuild the cellar and reinforce it so that the pressure of the water was no longer a factor. One of the main walls, well, two sections of the property underground, are actually the original Roman walls that were built by the Roman Empire at 50 BC. So more than 2,000 years old are the walls of the. Okay, so now you know how old this place is. I mean, it's so difficult, right, for people to understand. Comprehend 2,000 years. The building is 2,000 years old, right? Absolutely insane. The history, how deep this runs. And then we were talking about innovation as well, so we'll go back into that. This right here is probably the biggest of the innovations. It is 100% Nebbiolo Rosé, and it's named after their grandmother, Rosie. It's very limited. There's only 6,000 bottles production. 0 bottles of that are released to the United States, and 1/3 of total production comes to me.
Lucky
So
us.
lucky for you in the Bahamas and people visiting the Bahamas, we literally have 1/3 of the entire world's production of Rosie Nebbiolo Rosé. It is absolutely spectacular. You're gonna love it if you're into rosé, but a big rosé, something with real flavor, not light and fluffy, something with some real flavor. And you want rosé on a hot summer day with really good food. grilled food, something over a wood fire, anything like that, this is your choice. And the best place in the world to get it is here in the Bahamas because we have more than everybody else. So these wines come from the predominant denominations of the region: Barolo and Barbaresco. Barolo much older than Barbaresco. Barbaresco only became a DOCG in 1956, so it's a fairly young DOCG. Barolo much older than that. But they went from buying grapes to owning between 75 and 80 hectares of grapes through Serralunga, so that's the Ornato vineyard, the Mosconi vineyard, both in Serralunga d'Alba, Grinzane Cavour, which is the Gustava vineyard, La Mora is the Roncagalli, that is La Mora, little softer expressions, and in the Rivera Cru of Novello, which we have a whole other video about Rivera coming up as well, and our good friends at Elvio Cogno. Novello is a unique amphitheater that has really unique growing conditions, so that's adding a lot to it as well. And so all of these things are going into the Barolo, the P10 Barolo. You'll never forget P10 Barolo.
Oh, he's gonna hate you for
He's
that.
gonna hate me for this. Yeah, I know exactly what he's gonna call me. Inside joke. The Barbaresco, they have a single vineyard Barbaresco called Il Brico, and then they have the family summer home is actually at the top of that, and that is actually where we were fortunate enough to stay during this trip. Thank you very much, guys, for letting us do that. Il Brico is one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see. It's really, really high altitude. So you're in Traiso, and Traiso is one of the 3 communes of Barolo. Well, 3.5, but the half doesn't really matter. The 3 communes of Barbaresco, not Barolo. 3 communes of Barbaresco: Traiso, Nieve, and the town of Barbaresco. And Traiso has the highest elevation.
Oh, it's high.
It's very high. And so the views from the house are absolutely unbelievable. Getting up there on the road is a little bit,
I feel like I was like doing this away from the window when we were driving up the hill.
and driving, you get a little bit of the white knuckles going on. It's pretty interesting.
Once you get to the top, it's beautiful.
But you really get a lot of elegance and stuff from that site because of the altitude. It's so much colder at night. And they were telling us actually, between the 70s and the 80s, you would only have 2, maybe 3 really good vintages in a decade because it was so cold that they had a hard time ripening the grapes.
I mean, they had snow at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And down in the city.
Yeah,
There
would be no snow.
Back in the
Yeah,
day.
and that's 70s and 80s. So not that long ago,
Yeah.
40 years ago, 50 years ago, they had real trouble getting the grapes hot enough in order to ripen. We were there beginning of April, and there was nearly 30 degrees Celsius, so nearly 80 plus degrees Fahrenheit in the beginning of April or end of April. So
It's the beginning
definitely
of the
things have
growing season,
very,
yeah.
very, very different now than they were then. They speak very much about climate change and the warming of the region.
I mean,
Not
it's
necess-
changed the harvesting. It's changed
The
style.
timing, yeah.
It's changed the timing. Yeah.
That's changed the style of the wines completely.
Quantities.
Yeah. But it's also more than anything, it's given you consistency. As a consumer, you're now going to get a good year every single year. Now, whether it's, like 2024 is a much lighter year than other years, really elegant, quite finessed. 24 won't be out for a couple more years because the Barolo spends at least 36 months in oak. And Pio Cesare is one of the few wineries that actually does their Barbaresco exactly the same as the Barolo. So in Barbaresco, you're allowed to age 1 year less than Barolo.
Because Barbarescos are
Usually lighter.
Yeah.
Now, again, because of climate change, you're not seeing that. In our Produttori di Barbaresco video, which you can go check, those wines come from a whole bunch of different vineyard sites that are powerful, intense. We did a vintage vertical tasting at Produttori while we were there, and really see the difference that the vineyard sites are giving you and what the vintage differences are giving you. 20 to 21 were huge differences. 20, beautiful, elegant, drinkable now, really fresh, vibrant, high acidity. 21, monster, power, concentration, really, really, really intense. Put that one away for a while because it's going to take a while for it to calm down. But these are huge, huge, huge years. 21, amazing. 22 is going to be a beautiful year as well. We got to taste some of the new 22s that will be released in June. Absolutely spectacular. I really love 22. I think it's really good. In that kind of the cross between 24 and 21. Not as light and elegant as 24, but definitely less intense as 21. So you can actually really enjoy them. You'll be able to enjoy them much sooner. Like 21s are just monsters.
So these guys age Barolo the same as Barbaresco.
Exactly.
Barbaresco the same as Barolo.
Exactly. So Barbaresco, Barolo, it doesn't matter. It will always be done for 36 months. So the modernists' theory on Barolos and Barbarescos is that the single vineyards or cru wines are better. I still think that's 100% debatable. It depends, I think, on what you're looking for. I don't know. What's your theory on this?
Well, I think that the single vineyards are a representation of a time and a place. And so, like we saw with the 20 and 21, I mean, the time is very different. The place is the same. The time is very different. When you have the Classico kind of, the blends, you have a more consistent product.
Yep.
So you know what to expect, and you know that you're going to have A, B, and C. You're going to have the body, you're going to have the fruit, you're going to have the aging, and you know that it's going to be that way today, tomorrow, and the one that you buy in 3 years from now.
Right.
And if you don't know which specific vineyard, and I mean, we learned a lot on this trip, understanding the single vineyards and where they are and how it affects it, and closer to the river. And I mean, I knew all that in theory, but to actually be able to have
see it and taste it.
Yeah. So I think that if you're not confident in knowing which single vineyard, I mean, a single vineyard isn't going to be bad,
right.
But if you're not confident in knowing, and having a classic kind of blend of vineyards gives you a consistent, reliable product, knowing exactly.
And I also think,
and they're not lighter, more approachable, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, 21s are still monsters, but for me, the thing that separates classic from the cru, the cru, other than price point, because the crus are always way more expensive. For me, I find the blends, whether it's Pio Cesare or it's Ceretto or any of these great producers that we work with, if I want to learn the style of the house, I want these.
Yes.
Right? These to me are what really showcase the style of what they represent.
Mm-hmm.
The single vineyards are just taking that style and trying to not let the style override the sense of place.
Yeah.
And so I understand why the single vineyards are popular. They've taken very much on a Burgundian kind of philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
in which Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir are very similar in a lot of ways. Obviously, Nebbiolo a little bit more structured with a lot more tannin. But they're both thin-skinned grapes. They're both very much affected by the soil. They both have great aging potential when done well. They're both incredibly expressive grapes, and that's why they've gone a lot to the single vineyards. And I think it's great. They're amazing wines. But for someone on a budget, those single vineyard wines really make it difficult. They really do.
Unfortunately, it's usually the ones that I like.
Yeah, well, unfortunately for me. But one of the things that we always have to remember, don't forget to try the grapes that everyone would be drinking in the region. The people of Piedmont they don't drink Barolo and Barbaresco every day. It's not something that they do. They love them. They know them.
Mm-hmm.
They're very well educated on them. But Barolo and Barbaresco are still special wines for them too. And even though they're paying a fraction of the price than we are, they're
traveling
exactly
anywhere. The
their
bottles
everyday
are
wines. Their everyday wines are still Dolcetto. They're still Barbera, specifically Barbera for Pio. And then the fresh style wines, the whites, the rosé now is doing very well in Italy. These are all expressions of the same character, the same land, with the same Lunga DNA, the same focus on producer style. All of that is amazing, but you don't have the big price tag of the Barolo Barbaresco. Now, you definitely need to drink these wines at some point in your life if you're a wine nerd. But it's really the ones below where you start to really see the quality of a winery. I always find when a winery has entry-level wines, and it doesn't matter which ones they are, Barolo, Barbaresco, or not Barolo, Barbaresco, but anything but Barolo and Barbaresco. So Longa Nebbiolo, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or these guys they also have the Barbera Superior, the Superiore
Yep.
called Fides, and Fides will be in the Bahamas this year as well.
We secured a small
We
amount
did
of
manage
that
to secure what
after
was left.
tasting it and realizing that was
It's extraordinary.
yeah.
So when you try these lesser wines, you start to understand the difference between great wine producers and good wine producers, or so-so wine producers. Great wine producers make great wines, and it doesn't matter whether it's a $25 bottle of wine or a $250 bottle of wine. It's still a great bottle of wine, and you learn that the more you drink them and the more you try them. It's fascinating to me how impressive the lesser wines are. And I don't want to call them lesser wines. They're not lesser. They're just different. And that's what we need to get people to understand, is that they're not lesser because they're less expensive. They're just different grapes.
And they spend less time aging. So people aren't, the wineries
They're less
aren't
expensive to
hanging
produce.
on to them because when you're aging something for 3 years or 4 years, I mean, that comes that takes people moving it, that takes power for the lights that it's in, it takes space. I mean, that's real estate, right?
Yep.
So if this isn't aging as long as these ones, of course, it's not going to be
Doesn't
the
cost as
same.
much.
Yeah.
And this takes us back to a conversation that we were about to start a little while ago, when we said, what happens if you have no more space? And so this year, we actually were there the very day it opened. We were the first people to walk across the bridge. There is now a bridge from the original home and the original cellars across the street to the new facility that they've built on the other side of the road between the building and the river. And the river is right to the back side of the new facility. And it houses now all of the where they are storing the wines for aging, especially once they're bottled. Because once they're all of the barrels, like the big bozzi, the large storage vessels, including one of the largest vessels in the world, a 50,000 liter concrete tank. Once you have all of that done, it has to go into a bottle, but then it still has to age for a minimum of 1 to 2 years, depending on the wine. And they needed space for that. So now they've built dedicated space, and they also built a dedicated winery just for white wine. And I think that is absolutely fascinating that you are making such a commitment to something that most people don't know you for. It's not very traditional. And other than obviously the Gavi is pretty traditional, but it's just much better than most traditional Gavis. That commitment into having a completely separate white wine facility is going to really, I think, change the game for them as far as their white wine production.
This Gavi, there's a story about that, right?
Yeah. So in the 80s,
Speaking of whites.
in the 80s, Gavi was known around the world basically just as Gavi de Gavi, or Gavi from Gavi.
Or Cortese de Gavi.
No, Cortese de Gavi was Pio.
Oh, okay.
So
I got ahead of myself there.
Pio Boffa understood in the 80s and the 90s that Americans understood the single grape varietal wines that were coming out of California. And that was what they knew, and that was what they understood. And so he took the single varietal that was traditionally making Gavi, even though it was never on a bottle of Gavi before that from any producer. It was called Gavi de Gavi. Now he said, no, we're going to do what is going to help them understand it better. And they changed all the labels that were going to America to say Cortese de Gavi. So it's the grape from the place. And that made such a huge difference in the growth of this wine in America that it's boosted the sales of it worldwide. And now, because it's been 30 years of doing that, they now have changed the label back to just saying Gavi. And it's not Gavi de Gavi or Cortese de Gavi, it's just Gavi. And that makes so much sense to me. And I love the fact that they've simplified it and that, you know, Pio had put in so much work that it made them easy to simplify it, and it still worked.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Going back to like, just like the way that they make wine, this is a very low intervention cellar. So everything is gravity fed. So they don't really have large presses of any kind. It's really old school. Like it's really, really phenomenal. But because they're using large Slavonian oak cask, not small French barrique, they don't toast them. There's no wood flavors, only the micro-oxidization that happens from large barrels. And so you have the purest essence of Nebbiolo in these wines, and it really gives them such incredible beauty. Really, really extraordinary stuff. Yeah, I know it's hard for us to give everybody such a rundown on such a legendary family and a legendary wine in such a short period of time. But I mean, we can't talk about it forever. But a couple things.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that these wines represent what the region tries to represent, which is just hospitality and approachability and wanting to share.
Yeah.
Right? Like just want to hear. Let's have some wine together.
Yeah.
Let's have some food together, because the family history of where it came from, where they are now, I mean, that's all just so important, and you can feel that.
Yeah.
To me, I think you can feel that in the wines.
Yeah, they're just extraordinary. And one other thing that we had an opportunity to try that I had never tried before from any producer, Barolo Chinato.
Yeah.
So Barolo Chinato it's kind of a digestive for the end of the meal, and it is basically distilled Barolo must made with quinine and all kinds of herbs and spices, some added sugar, some reserved sugar, just delicious. Not super sweet, but really herbal. I don't want to say medicinal because that gives it a bad connotation, but it has like kind of
Amaro kind of,
yeah, like a Fernet Branca kind of style, but way more delicious than that. Like way more delicious. So if you get a chance to find some Barolo Chinato from Pio Cesare, definitely pick up a bottle and keep it around because it's absolutely fantastic.
Delicious with chocolate, with cheese, by itself.
Yeah, we were having it with 24-month aged Parmesan, just hacked off the side of the wheel, like just amazing stuff.
And chocolate, and bitter chocolate.
And bitter chocolate, yeah, really delicious stuff. On that note, I think we'll wrap up part 1 of this, and then we'll prepare you for part 2. Do check out part 2, please. If you watch this, please check out part 2. Federica's story is really quite amazing, and just she's an incredible human being, and I'm very happy and very proud that I had an opportunity to get this interview. So I want you all to watch it. Please check out part 2. Until then, this is it for part 1. Until we open up another story, we're gonna unbottle one for you now. Cheers.
Cheers.